Alright, now let's start with character design. So the first thing I'm going to do is that I'm going towards my Align tab and I will make sure that my avatar background is aligned. Now let's go towards the Illustrator layers and Form layers and let's find our face. Well, it is a rounded rectangle and the size of it is 199 by 297. So let's create a shape layer by going towards new and then shape layer, and in add menu I'm going to add a rectangle and then let's add a fill for it, and also let's change its color. And now let's go towards the rectangle path, and now let's turn off the chain option, and then I'm going to type the dimensions. And now let's round it a bit. Okay, now let's rename it to face. And let's go towards our selection tool and move our face in here. And now we need to create these cheeks. So let's create a circle. So I'm going towards my shape tool and then let's select a darker color. So let's select the eyedropper tool and change the color. Now let's hold shift and let's create a circle. And let's put the anchor point into middle by pressing Ctrl plus Alt plus Home. And now I only need a quarter of the circle and the rest of it I need to mask it. Well, if I want to do it with the masking technique that we learned in the last video, it will be pretty hard, as you see. Well, this is where the track matte comes in. Well, track matte is the same as mask, but the technique is different. Well, first let's delete the mask. In order to use a track matte, you will need a shape layer as a mask. So for this example, I want to hide everything outside of this face, so the best way is to use the face as a mask. So let's duplicate it by pressing Ctrl plus D, and let's move it above, and I'll tell you why in a second. And let's rename it to mask. Now let's change its color to red. So first make sure your track matte panel is on. So if you don't have this panel, make sure these two icons in here are blue. Now the important part is that the mask should be above the layer that you want to hide or reveal. So let's rename this one to cheek and then go towards the track matte channel in here. Now we have four options. The first one is alpha matte. As you see, After Effects uses this mask and shows us the layer that is inside of the mask and hides the rest of it. And the alpha invert is going to do exact opposite thing. It is going to hide inside of the mask and reveals what is outside of the mask. Well, the Luma channel is basically the same, but it takes the effect from the Luma channel. And we don't really need to go deeper than this. So right now I'm going to set it on alpha. So our cheek is a little big, so let's decrease its size. And now let's press S to reveal the scale and then change its size. Now let's repeat the same step for the next one. So let's duplicate the cheek and then let's move it in here. And then let's duplicate the mask and move it up. And as you see, the mask is already on alpha. Alright, all done. So let's go towards the Illustrator layers and let's select the left eye. As you see, the dimension is 68 by 68. So this time let's go towards the shape tool and create a circle. And let's press Ctrl plus Alt plus Home to move the anchor point towards middle. And now let's go towards the ellipse path and let's change the size to 68. And now let's hold space. And now let's go towards the color guide. And sadly we don't have this color, so I'm going to use the eye as a reference. Okay, so we don't need this layer, so let's delete it. And let's move the eye in here. And now let's rename it to left eye. And let's duplicate it and move it towards the right. And let's call this one right eye. Now, in order to create the eyeball, I'm just going to duplicate the left eye. And then on ellipse path, I'm just going to halve its size. So I'm just going to right divide by 2. So let's bring back the eye one more time to get the eyeball color. So let's delete it and let's rename it to left eyeball. And now let's duplicate it one more time and let's move it above. And let's change its name to right eyeball. And lastly, let's adjust it by arrow keys on our keyboard. Now, the important section of this video is that right now, if I want to move my face, as you see, the rest of the parts are not moving. So we need to link eyes and cheeks into face. Well, this is where parenting comes in. Parenting is the process of setting up multiple layers so that the movement of one layer follows the movement of another layer. And the parenting section is always in here. We basically want every related character parts follow the face. So we need to parent them to face. Now, if I move it, as you see, the cheeks are moving along with them as well. Right now, for the eyes, first we need to create a mask for them. In that way, they will move inside of the eye. So let's duplicate the right eye and let's put it above eyeball. Let's call it mask. And now let's set the track matte channel on alpha in order to make it work. So let's do the same thing for the left eye. So let's duplicate it and let's call it mask. And now let's set the track matte channel to alpha. And now I'm going to select the right eyeball and mask, and I'm going to parent it to right eye. And then I'm going to parent the eye to the face. So let's test it. As you see, when I move my face, the right eye moves with it as well. So I'm going to do the same thing for the left eye. I'm going to parent these two to the left eye and the left eye to the face. And now, as you see, our character moves correctly. So in order to create a mouth for our character, we need to learn the basics of pen tool. So the pen tool is located in here. And if I hold on it, I can have access to it. So by selecting pen tool, the first thing you need to do is that you need to set a stroke for your pen. So this time I'm going to turn off the fill option and then I'm going to change the stroke color to white. And then on my canvas, if I click, I can create straight lines like this. But also, if you hold and drag, you can create curvy lines like this. Now that we created this path, but first let me change its color so we can see it better. Right now, we can change our stroke in here. We can make it bigger or thicker. Now pay attention to the edges. Remember when we were talking about creating shapes, when we went into shape panel and then in stroke tab, we couldn't really use the line cap option. But now if we select this option, we can change the path edges. Now the next option is add vertex tool. By using this tool, you can add points into your shape and then you can change your shape using these handles. The next tool will allow you to remove points from your shape. The next one is convert vertex tool, where you can select a point and change it. Now for this one, since the design phase is already a bit long, I won't create the mouth. Instead, we are just going to drag it towards our face. Well, to have access to our type tool setting, we need to go towards the character panel. And if you don't have this panel, go towards the window panel and then select it in here. So right now, if I select the type tool, which is in here, and then I start to type, for example, the username, as you see, we have this text. Now, on the first option in here, we can change the fonts. For this one, for example, I'm going to select Helvetica font. And then, in here, you can change the font size. You can make it bigger or you can make it smaller. And in here, you can change the color. In here, you can add a stroke for your text. You can swap between them by pressing this little icon in here. And you can disable the stroke in here. In here, you can increase the leading for your text. Now, in here, you can add spacing between letters. On here, you can make your stroke bigger or smaller. And this panel can help you to select if you like to have a stroke or fill first. And this option, you can vertically scale your text. And with this one, you will scale it horizontally. And now let's bring back everything to its normal size. And this one is baseline shift. And lastly, this option can help you decrease the space between each character. And in this option, you can change the font types. And now this is the paragraph panel where you can adjust your text. Okay, so now that we have the basic knowledge, I'm going to import what is left from our design in order to finish the design phase. So I'm going to bring the password bar and then I'm going to bring the username bar as well. And also we are going to adjust them a bit. However, I will fix them later on when we are on break. And now we need to bring our signing button. Okay, so I took a quick break and in between I also fixed the position of our shapes. So the first thing we do, we are going to animate this mouse pointer. And the way we are going to animate it is that the pointer comes in and then it rotates. And then we are going to type the username and then it goes towards the password. And lastly, it goes towards the button. And then it goes off the screen. So I'm going to select the mouse and the first thing I do is that I'm going to press Y and then I will move my anchor point up. The reasoning behind is that if I go towards my transform panel, I can rotate my shape really better. Let's press Ctrl+Z to undo the action and then let's press V to go towards the selection tool. And now let's move our mouse pointer in here. And this time I'm going to press R to bring up rotation. And then I'm going to adjust my mouse. Now, usually I start animating on 1 second because in that way I can offset the keyframes easier. So I'm going to press P to bring up position and then I'm going to set a keyframe and then I'm going 12 frames forward and then I'm gonna bring it in here. And then I'm gonna go towards the 2 seconds and I'm gonna move it in here. And then again on 12 frames forward, we will move it in here. And then I'm gonna go 1 second forward and then I'm going to copy this keyframe by pressing Ctrl+C and then I will paste it by pressing Ctrl+V. And this gap is for when we want to animate our username. And even we can increase its time a little bit more. And then we will move it down. And then we are going to copy and paste this keyframe. And then 12 frames forward, we are going to move it towards the bottom. And then we will click on the button and the pointer is going back a bit. And then it goes off the screen. So this is the basic animation. Now, as you see, the movement is not good and realistic. So the first thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to select the keyframes and then I'm going to right click on them and then in keyframe assistant, I'm going to select the easy ease. Now, the movement is better. Now we are going to add depth into our animation by adding a rotation into our mouse pointer. Now if I hold shift and then I press R simultaneously, it will open rotation property while it shows our position property. Now till here everything is good, so I'm going to click on this icon again in order to create the same keyframe. Now I'm going to rotate it up, something like this. And again in here we'll click on diamond icon in here so we don't change any property in between. And 2 frames forward, I'm going to change the duration. Something like this should be fine. And then we will move till here. And since we don't need to change any property, we will set another diamond keyframe in here so we don't change any property in between. Okay, now let's move keyframe in here. Now let's assume we press the button in here. We can move our mouse pointer a bit up. However, we will need to change these 2 keyframes in order to make it work. Now let's decrease the spacing between it. And also I will delete this keyframe and I will copy and paste this one. So in that way, there will be no animation in between. Now we need to adjust our rotation. And then when it goes down, we need to adjust rotation like this. And then it's going to click on the button. And then we will rotate it like this. And then we change it like this. So this is our basic animation. Let's press F9 to apply standard easing. And then let's watch. So let's press space to view it. So there is a small delay in here, which I'm going to fix it by dragging a keyframe in here. So far we have this basic animation. So let's press space to view it. Now the first thing we need to do is that we need to fix these 2 keyframes. Right now the movement is a bit slow in this phase. So select these 2 keyframes, go towards the graph editor, and then we will use these handles and we will push them into middle. Okay, now it's better. Now in real life most movements are happening in a circular path, and in animation we call this movement an arc. Motions of all living beings such as people, animals, birds, fish, and so many more do not happen in straight lines, and they will happen in arcs. So in order to start, we will select all of our position keyframes and then we will right click on them. And then we will select keyframe interpolation. And then we will change spatial interpolations from linear to Bezier. Now, as you see, we will have these handles in here that can help us to create arc for our animation. And now I'm going to select these 2 keyframes and then I'm going to create an arc like this. And with these 2, I'm going to pull the handles up. And now let's watch. Okay, as you see, the movement is much better and realistic, but we will still need to adjust our mouse pointer a bit. In here, we have a small problem. We need to adjust and remove few keyframes. So first, let's drag handles a bit, and also let's fix rotation in here, and let's delete this keyframe. We also need to fix rotation when it's in here, same as here. And since we don't need any rotation change, we will add a diamond keyframe and then we will change it. Alright, now when it is in here, let's add a small delay by shifting the keyframes. So let's delete this keyframe and let's drag this one in here. And now let's delete this one. Now we will add a small delay by copying and pasting this keyframe. And lastly, we will fix it in here. Now, this is much smoother. Okay, it is time to talk about Puppet Pin tool in After Effects. I told you to keep in mind that a solid layer is a pixel layer. Now, in here I have 2 rectangles. One is created as a vector versus one with a pixel. The vector layer are basically made with mathematical softwares and you won't lose quality if you zoom like this. However, the pixel layer will lose quality and the edges become chunky. That being said, Puppet Pin tool only works on the pixel layers, so you can't use Puppet Pin tool on shapes or rasterized layer. Now the Puppet Pin tool is located in here, and if I hold on it, there are several options in it there. I won't go deeper because it will take a lot of time to explain all of them. So if I put pins on a shape, as you see, it won't work. So if I go towards the insulator layers, I will just create 3 pins on my shape. Now if I press U on my keyboard, I will see the 3 keyframes that After Effects automatically generated. Now I can use these pins to basically move and deform my shape. So this is basically the Puppet Pin tool. Now there are some settings that I want to talk about them. The first thing is this icon. If I click on it, it is going to rasterize my layer, meaning it will treat it as a shape layer. And if you do that, you won't be able to work with your Puppet Pin tool. So make sure this option is always turned off when you are working with Puppet Pin tool. Now if we delete these keyframes, and now let's go towards the Puppet Pin tool one more time, and let's set expansion on 2. Now I will explain them in a second, and let's create a pin. Now the first option in here is mesh, which it shows you this kind of spider web around your shape. However, expansion is just defines how much you want to deform your shape. Note that you don't really want to go like this, just try to hold it a bit more than your original shape. Now the density can help you to create a more realistic deform. For example, if I create another pin and then I put density on 1, it is going to be really hard to deform it. Now let's put another pin in here to demonstrate it better. So if I increase it to something like 12, as you see, it works better. So this is the basics of Puppet Pin tool. So far we have this animation. Now let's delete this action a bit further. And in here we have a small problem. The movement is really fast and bad, so we need to adjust some keyframes. Okay, it's a bit better, but still I am going to increase the timing between it. Okay, it is much better now. Now let's add 3 pins to our mouse pointer. And I will also fix the settings on my Puppet Pin tool. And I will turn the mesh off. Now I'm going to press U to reveal the keyframes. And then I will deform the mouse pointer frame by frame to create a sense of life and give our animation more depth. Now let's zoom in and let's copy the first keyframes and paste them in here. So now let's change it a bit in here. Well, there's nothing much I can say except we are just adding more depth to our animation. Okay, so far we have this animation. Now we need to animate the buttons. So let's start with username. When you click on it, it's going to get smaller a bit and then it scales to its original size. So let's press S, and when mouse pointer is almost in here, let's set a keyframe and let's go 5 frames forward. And now let's set it on 90%, and then again 5 frames forward, let's set it on 100, and let's apply standard easing into it. Now we can also decrease the timing between the keyframes by 2 frames in order to get a smoother animation. Now when it goes in here, we click on password bar and we will animate it. And we can also copy scale keyframes from username bar, and then we can paste it in here. Okay, but we need to push it a bit back. So when it's in here, we are going to add a scale keyframe for this one. Now the movement is a bit slow in my opinion, so I'm going to adjust it a bit further. And now it is time to animate our eyes. So we can animate them one by one, or we can animate both of them at the same time. And if you want to animate both of the eyes at the same time, you will need a node. To create a node, you can right click in empty space in here, and then in new, you can select null object. So what is a null object? A null object is an invisible layer that you can create to be a super parent. But first, let's move the anchor points towards the middle. And let's move it in here. And also let's rename it to the eyes. And let's also make it a bit smaller. Now let's parent the eyeballs to the node. And let's parent the node to the face. Now if I move the node, as you see, I can control my eyes. Now let's press Ctrl plus Z. And now let's zoom out a bit. Now let's set a keyframe on position, and let's make our eyes follow the mouse pointer. So let's move it down. Then towards here, and then here. Now when it goes up, we're gonna move it towards its original position. And then when it goes down, we will just move it a bit down. Now to create a sense of security, we will need to create a new set of eyes for our animation. But first, let's create a blink animation for our character. So let's select the left eye. And now let's turn off the chain option. I can change the Y value to get a blink. So let's find the left and right eye, and then press S to bring up a scale value. And at the beginning, let's create a keyframe. And now let's go 3 frames forward, and then we push it towards 0. And now let's copy and paste first keyframe to get a blink. And now let's copy and paste it in here for another blink. And one when our mouse pointer clicks on the password bar. But this time we will delete this keyframe and we will replace it with a closed eye shape. So let's go towards our pen tool. Now let's set the stroke on 9 pixel, and the black color is fine, but I will disable the color for it. And then I will create a shape just like this. And then I'm going towards the content, shape, stroke, and I will turn the line cap into round, same as the join. And I'm going to rename it to closed eye. And then I will duplicate it and I will right click on it, and in transform panel I will flip it horizontally. And then we will select both of these layers, and I will drag the beginning of it till here so we don't see them at the beginning of our animation. Okay, we need to push them a bit back, and also we need to move them a bit down like this. Okay, now when our mouse pointer goes towards the bottom, we will cut the end of these 2 layers. And then we will find our left eye and right eye, and first we'll set a keyframe so there will be no animation in between. And then we are going to open our eyes.